Well, good morning, everyone. This morning, I am joined by State Senator Sarah Elfreth from District 30, and we're going to talk about SB 386, which has to do with the student member of the board's voting rights. So, Senator Elfreth, thank you for joining me.
Yep. Thank you for having me.
And can you kind of explain this bill for folks that don't know a lot about it yet?
Sure. So this is a bill that's been introduced a number of times so far, just to make sure that most. I was reading through the bill again this morning, and it's a rather long bill because it covers every state board of education. So it's very repetitive because it has to go down. But for the boards that don't currently have a student, it adds a student. For the boards that have a student, it adds voting rights for that student. Something that Anne Arundel County Board of Ed has had for a very long time. And I have to tell you, Scott, we're very proud of our student members, but more important, they're incredibly successful. They go on to do great things. But more importantly, they tend to be the most mature and non-political members of our board. Just, I can't say enough good things about the student members we've had here in Anne Arundel County. This is also really personal for me. I was a student member of a board, not of a K through 12 board, but of the University System of Maryland's Board of Regents when I was in college, and feel very strongly that not only do you have a process that ensures you have a really strong, qualified student member of boards, but again, in my experience, we've had really solid student members of boards, and I think it's a testament to the quality of education our school systems provide.
Okay, so look, I read through as much as I could the legislation, obviously focusing on Carroll County, but like you said, it's repetitive. It basically says the same
Right.
thing for each jurisdiction. And so I want to talk about what it says. And it says the student member of the board would have a vote on most everything,
Right.
minus personnel matters,
Right.
disciplinary matters, and a couple of other things. But
Right.
that's correct. I'm reading
Yeah.
that correctly.
You are, yeah. So unless the board votes to give those students greater voting powers, so the state law would be the floor, and local boards would be able to go above that if they vote with a majority. But I think it's important. We're talking about juniors, seniors in high school, so I understand the personnel issues now. When I was a senior in college and I was on the board of regents for the university system, I did have to undergo terminating a university president and hiring a university president. It was a phenomenal experience at a young age to be a part of a board that dealt with those issues. So, I think, again, based on the process we have in Anne Arundel, I'm sure Carroll County's process, because you have a sitting student, is very thorough. It's very representative, and it ensures the best and the brightest students are on the board. I think the state floor makes a lot of sense, but if Carroll decides to go above that, I think you have really qualified young people who are capable of making decisions.
So the state floor would include things like the budget, contracts with businesses, policies within the school, redistricting decisions
Hmm.
for the county or for the
Yeah,
jurisdiction.
right.
They would have a vote in all of those things.
That they would, yes.
Okay, so it begs the question, does a 16, 17-year-old, in many cases, sometimes 18,
Right.
19-year-old,
Right.
have the background or knowledge to vote on matters of that significance? Carroll County, half billion, sorry, dollar education budget, in places like Montgomery or Howard, it's over $1 billion of budget. Does a 16 or 17-year-old have the knowledge and background and expertise to make those decisions?
Well, no, not naturally, but again, the process you go through, we're talking about the best and brightest of students. We're talking about students have been actively engaged in their student bodies and are going to benefit from the mentoring of both the professional staff you have at your school system, but also the mentoring of the rest of the board. And that's really, really important. Um, Fun personal fact, and I know you don't know this, you would have no reason to know this. So I was the student member of the board for the Board of Regents in 2009, 2010. I actually wrote and published a book on student regents and student members of university governing boards across the country. And ironically, it was on my desk this morning. I only have a couple copies of this left, but it speaks to the history of lay governing boards in universities. So not the K through 12 we're talking about, but I interviewed my counterparts across the country, and one said something that was really salient to me, which is, what does it say about a school system and the quality of education you're providing to your students if you don't trust them to participate in a meaningful way with the present and the future of that school system? I think it's the ultimate testament to the quality of education you're providing to your students.
I get that. So Board of Educations, whether it
Mhm.
be locally, across the state, across the country, can be contentious.
Mhm.
And are you concerned or with this change about undue influence placed upon kids? I mean, we're talking 16, 17-year
Yeah.
olds by the elected adults that for these kids to vote in a certain way. Look, I look at this as, these kids should be focused on things like their education and their future and not concerned with did they vote the wrong way and is now that in danger because I voted the wrong.
Right. Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head of, I think, a real challenge to our boards of education nationally is that we're becoming so politicized in a way they just have never been before. So I completely hear you on the new set of challenges that, frankly, when I was a student member, I didn't experience. But I'll also tell you, I wouldn't be in the Senate today. I wouldn't. I was the youngest woman ever elected to the Senate by quite a bit. I was elected at 30. I wouldn't have been in the Senate if I hadn't had the experience and the growth opportunity if I wasn't on the board of regents. So, we're talking. It's not a straight democracy here. We're talking about one member who has gone through a vigorous selection process, who I would hope that the adult members of the board are mentoring and taking that young person's growth and education and professional development to heart. It's unfortunate boards of education have been so politicized. It's, I think, something that scares me, and it is not the healthiest for our students or for our communities. But again, I can speak to, in Anne Arundel County, our student board members have consistently, and we've had political controversial votes here in Anne Arundel County, and consistently our student members have been the voices of reason. They've been the rational actors. They've been the most prepared people on that board and in that room. Across. I've gotten to know at least 5 or 6 student members of our board, and they're all going on to do great things. Actually, one of them now works in the Senate as the chief of staff to the chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee. Was the student member of the board 6 years ago. Her growth has just it's incredible to see what these young people are capable of and what they go on to accomplish, and a lot to do with because they've gained really great opportunities and professional development from this experience.
So what about student board elections? And before I lived in Carroll, I lived
Mhm.
in Howard for 20 years. I saw a student board election because a student member has some voting rights in Howard,
Mhm.
different than what it is here in Carroll. But I saw the community get involved in the
Mhm.
student board elections.
Mhm.
And by changing this
Mhm.
across the state,
Mhm.
that becomes a potential issue across now the state where it's not the students picking it is now the community becoming involved in student elections because that's a vote. And that vote could have ramifications again on some of the things I mentioned, the budget, redistricting, and other things. I mean, redistricting to me is the big one
Yeah.
because of development and how redistricting plays
Yeah.
into development, and now this is a vote
Right.
that can affect that.
Right.
It to me that is a huge
Right.
thing as part of adding this vote. And look, Carroll has 5 board members. This
Mhm.
is a 6th vote.
Mhm.
Some of these 3-2 votes
Right.
that come down now,
Mhm.
that be a 3-3 vote if something does pass or doesn't pass or whatever, it becomes a big deal.
Right. So what I would say to that, is I hope it doesn't get contentious. And again, we're seeing the politicization of boards of education that we've never seen before. I think it's also really important, to your point on redistricting, it's important to have a voice on that board of somebody who is living that every day in a way the other board members are not. You know, other board members are parents, they're active members of the community, but they're not in a school every day. I can't speak to the redistricting conversations happening in Carroll, but the ones happening in Anne Arundel right now and in Howard are a lot about overcrowding,
Right.
are a lot about schools at 120% capacity, and how that is negatively impacting, student outcomes and success. And I think that can be spoken to from a student in a completely different and more, and frankly more authentic way than somebody who on the board who is not a student. It's one voice that I think is really important to add. And I can only say again, phenomenal student members in Anne Arundel County. And I think it's safe to say that the process that they go through, all of it's gonna, it's gonna be okay. And again, it's the greatest testament to the quality of education for Carroll County schools to have students who are capable of making these hard decisions. That's a testament to the education system.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one last question I have for you, and
Okay.
and it has to do with local control. Look,
Okay.
some local jurisdictions have made this decision that we're talking about, Anne Arundel as an
Mhm.
example. Some jurisdictions, there's 7 of them, give
Mhm.
the student boards partial voting rights.
Mhm.
14 jurisdictions have student board members that don't have voting rights. 2 jurisdictions don't have student board members today.
Mhm.
And we talk about local control of education across a number of things, across both political sides of the aisle. When it came to COVID, masks, it was about local control. When it came to the calendars and when we start schools, that became about local control.
Right.
By changing this, this
Mhm.
changes the local control and local decisions of education.
Mhm.
So, can you speak to that? Because I can promise you, I would bet, my opinion, that this is going to come up when this bill comes up is local control. And this is the legislature again
Mhm.
changing the local control of education across the state.
So what I hear you. At the same time, this is a legislative process. There's a reason the bill hasn't passed in its current form. This is the whole point of what we do down here for 90 days
Right.
is take a bill, negotiate, and that's what I've found. That's what I love about the job I have right now. A skill set I hope I've really honed is how do we get folks in a room who might disagree with each other, have different and opposing viewpoints, and work out a solution. So my point is, this bill has started an important conversation. If folks feel really strongly about amendments and tweaks here and there. I'm not the chief sponsor. I'm a co-sponsor, so it's not my bill alone. I would bring those to the bill sponsor and bring those to the bill hearing and be solutions oriented and say, share concerns in a healthy manner, share solutions in a healthy manner. What's really frustrating for us down here is when people come and just say no,
Right. And
without
I
a
hope you don't think
second.
I'm being, and I hope you
No,
don't
and
think I'm
you're
being
not.
overly
No, I'm
critical.
just
This is the
yeah.
stuff that I hear.
And I appreciate that, and I think it's an important discussion, and that's the point of the legislative process. It's why we don't do it in a vacuum. It's why we do it with public hearings and public debate. So I would recommend if folks feel strongly about this, come down and testify. We accept Zoom testimony. I know it's a long drive from Carroll County some days. I get it. I'm going to Carroll County quite a bit these days. Um, so I would recommend, leaning in, engaging, participating, sharing thoughts on, you feel okay with voting rights on certain things, but perhaps not on other things. I think that is a really important part of this process. And I encourage that because to your point that, Carroll County residents know Carroll County school system better than we do. So I would recommend engaging in a solutions oriented way, and in a positive way, and starting from the premise of these are again the best and brightest, the greatest testament to the school system, and you have an idea for this bill. That's my recommendation to folks listening.
and Carroll has some great student members of the board
Yeah.
that I've seen, and I think there's a role for them to play. I
Mhm.
don't know what that role is. It's not for me to decide. It's for
Right.
others.
Right.
But I hope this information at least helps the community understand this legislation, gets involved in this, send some solutions,
Mhm.
to you and the other sponsors of the bill. I know that you've got to run off and do the fun stuff in Annapolis that you do for 3 months, but I want to thank you again for joining
Yeah.
me and just taking a little bit of time to do this.
Anytime. Happy to join. Thank you, Scott.
All right, folks, have a great day.